Hi, I'm Greg Euland with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. I'm really excited about the conversation today. I'm talking with Emily Iberle, who's a partner manager at Uber, and Anthony Montiero, Executive Vice President of Integrated Partnerships at Draiver. Anthony's been on the podcast before. Emily's a first-time guest, but we've been working on for quite a while and just announced a partnership between the three companies, Reynolds, Uber, and Draiver, that'll essentially allow you to schedule a ride for customers straight from the DMS. No reason to go anywhere else. It's a really powerful partnership, and I'm excited to get into the conversation with them. But before we do, Emily, Anthony, hoping you could introduce yourselves a little bit, and we can dive in that way.
Yeah, hey everybody.
Emily, why don't you go first, Emily? Sorry, it's always interesting when you have two people that you're talking to, a group of three, because then everybody just looks at each other. Who should answer this question? But so, Emily, go ahead.
All right, thanks. Hey everybody, I'm Emily. I work at Uber. I've been specializing in automotive partnerships, and so I'm very excited to be here today to talk about Reynolds and Draiver and the way that we're teaming up together.
Hey everyone, Anthony Montiero here with Draiver. Many years in the auto industry and tech side. Been working very closely with both the Reynolds and Uber team on this partnership, and we're really excited to roll it out upcoming here, and really excited to be back on the podcast.
Yep. No, thanks for being here. And with this conversation, usually, we might ease in a little bit, but I kind of want to dive right in, if you guys don't mind, because the part of this that strikes me as something that if I'm a dealer or I'm a consumer, the first thing that comes to my mind is, why do I need this, right? Uber is super convenient. The consumer can order right from their phone. They're in control. It costs, $10, $15 probably. You're not going very far, likely. So if I need a ride, why not just do it myself, right? Why do I need to rely on somebody else? So I don't know if one of you wants to jump in there, but, I think of, in a sales background, I think of the old Ben Duffy question, right? If I were you then, and that's the first thing that pops into my mind. Like, why does this matter?
For sure. I think I could take this one, Anthony, if that's all right. So Uber for Business is here for dealerships, so they can leverage the largest mobility network in the world to create a seamless transportation experience for their customers. And I think that dealerships need this because it's important. It's important for the dealers and it's important for their customers. From the dealership perspective, dealers are very well aware that, every touch point with a customer can have a direct impact on CSI and their bottom line. So by providing a stress-free transportation experience, dealerships make it more convenient for their customers to get to and from the dealership, which can reduce the hassle of finding transportation, and it increases the likelihood that customers will return to the dealership for future service or car buying needs. Additionally, utilizing Uber helps dealers control their costs. So dealerships only pay for the rides booked and allows dealers to reduce their reliance on shuttle services and their loaner fleet. So not only are they avoiding the cost of maintaining shuttles or loaners with Uber, but they're also eliminating the hassle associated with things like upkeep, insurance, maintenance, liability. And lastly, dealerships love our network. Shuttles and loaners are a fixed supply at a dealer, but with Uber, they can supply, as many rides as needed without being limited by their shuttle or loaner availability. Maybe a long-winded answer here, but I want to talk about the customer perspective for a moment because I think it's important. From the customer perspective, customers know and trust Uber. And today's tech-savvy consumers have higher expectations. Shuttles might be perceived as, inconvenient for those multitasking customers. And beyond that, they could have longer wait times, multiple stops, limited availability. So with Uber, we're offering those customers a quick and convenient experience they already use in their daily lives. It's private, safe, and it takes them directly to their final destination. And they can track the trip in their app, just like they're used to doing in their personal lives. So to sum it up, I think Uber has made traction in auto, and I think auto needs Uber. we're not only a great fit for dealerships, it's because we're a really good fit for their customers as well.
All right. So how does that work then? So that clears it up a little bit. But so the consumer's they're able to track the ride coming, in their app. They'll see everything. So I guess how does that work? So I'm put myself in the consumer's seat, right? And yeah. I mean, I'm party of one, but I think most people have probably used Uber at this point. Right? It's not a revolutionary idea anymore. And in my head, I drop the car off, I pull out my phone, I open up Uber, and I request a ride. And that's pretty straightforward. Now the dealership can do that for me. They may be able to do it. Maybe talk a little bit about, when that happens. Do they offer it at the appointment? And if so, then how does that connect? So how am I as the consumer notified that a ride's on the way? Or because, in my head, when I think through requesting an Uber, I request the Uber, and then my phone's there, and I see when that driver's going to be there, right? It's going to be a silver Toyota Camry. It'll be there, license plates, XYZ1234. It'll be there in 7 minutes, and then, I can track it. So what does that experience look like if somebody else, a dealership, requests that ride for me?
Sure. So the customer gets a text message. So dealership has all the customer information. When the dealer orders a ride for the customer, they get a text that pops up on their phone. And the great thing about the Uber Central product is the product that's integrated is that you don't even need to have an Uber to take the ride. So if you have an Uber, a link pops up on your phone that says, hey, track this in your Uber app, and it just opens the app and you can see it there. But if you don't have it, you'll get updates via SMS texting on your phone to say, here's that silver Toyota Camry that's on the way. Here's your driver's name. They're about 9 minutes away. So you get those SMS text updates. If you don't have the app or if you don't want to open the app, there's a way to track your ride that's coming.
Okay, that makes sense. So, you mentioned the dealership only pays for the rides that are used, right? Which makes complete sense. Are you seeing, and Anthony, I don't know if this is a question for you or Emily, but are you seeing dealers pass that through, or are you seeing dealers pay for that? Do we know yet?
So it's a blend, right? And I guess before we answer the question, like what does Draiver have to do with this part of it, right? Like why is Draiver here? Well, happened?
Actually, Anthony, do me a favor. So just maybe start with give me the 30-second spiel on what Draiver does in general, and then we can fit into where the company fits into this conversation.
Sure. So Draiver is essentially a vehicle and people movement platform. We move vehicles. We scaled rapidly in the United States. We're now moving into Latin America and other parts of North America. And what we found is the ability to move vehicles outside of a platform or a truck is very, very difficult. And dealerships, to Emily's point, had a really difficult time, especially when COVID came in with shuttle vans and service valet and service pickup and drop off. And that's really where we fit in. We have 20,000 drivers globally that will actually come and pick up that vehicle and move it. So what our partnership with Uber has been primarily is relocating those drivers, not necessarily always consumer facing moving people, but driver movement, which is critical to creating efficiencies around pickup and drop off. But then when you layer in the additional ability to replace those shuttle vans and to quickly on demand move your customers out of that service department or into your sales department, it makes a perfect scenario of a three-way partnership, because Reynolds can deliver the platform, which is, as we know, one of the best in the industry, and the customers and your customers, which are our customers, it gets confusing. There's the client, and then there's the customer, which is the person purchasing or servicing the car. We want to make their lives easier. The requester, how do we make their lives easier? How do we tie it to the repair order, and how do we make it seamless so that there's not a whole bunch of different things that the end user has to do? And the customer, to them, it's simple and easy. And the best part is with this, they don't have to pay for it because most of the time the dealer's picking up that cost because it's an added benefit and it's something that will keep customers coming back to them, which might separate them from their competition in that marketplace.
Good. No, that's great. Go ahead.
And just to add on top of that, we see that dealerships are covering this almost exclusively for their customers as a courtesy ride for them, especially when they're replacing their shuttle cost or their loaner fleet with Uber.
Okay,
but also, it's a lot of OEMs that reimburse for warranty work consider rideshare as a part of that work that can be reimbursable. So it's another piece of, an RO submission to an OEM for warranty work then could be added on and then pass through to the OEM instead of the dealership.
100%.
That's good. So to build off of that, then, do you see a world too in the not too distant future where, so OEMs have a lot of programs, right? They have a lot of incentive programs. They have a lot of things that they encourage their dealers to do, in some cases require their dealers to do. Do you see a world where they would require or incentivize dealers to offer these types of rides? I mean, I see that as the next step, right? If you're doing it for warranty, why wouldn't you do it for customer pay and try to encourage that?
We're seeing it already. There's a few OEs already that they're either incentivizing the dealership to provide a service valet or rideshare option to their consumers, or they're mandating it, and there may be some penalty in your CSI or some penalty that they're imposing upon the dealers if they don't offer it to a certain percentage or fulfill it with a certain percentage of their repair orders. It's happening.
Yeah. And so in that scenario, so happening today and probably will continue to grow in the future, without this type of integration where you can do everything from the DMS, it's clearly easily trackable. There's a opcode on the RO, right? You can report on everything very simply. Without that, what does that reporting process look like, or even that auditing process look like if it were to happen? How would a dealer go about proving essentially that they offered ride share or some percentage of their customers ride share?
They simply wouldn't be able to. You'd have to keep some sort of a manual log that the OE's not going to accept as proof. They're really, at this point, they want to see tracking data. When the pickup occurred, when the drop off occurred, whether it was a person or a vehicle, who the customer was, the repair order data. So all of that electronic data is really what they're looking for. And we know that over the years, the OEs have been collecting data from dealers for many things, whether it's marketing or whether it's vehicle style and color and customer satisfaction. This is just one more data point that they can collect, which is good, in my opinion, because the more you offer these services to consumers, the better the experience is overall from a customer perspective. We all can raise our hand and say, would you rather be picked up and dropped off than having somebody follow you all the way to the dealership and then drop your car off and then need another ride back on your own dime?
Yeah. And I would present too that it makes it easier on the employee at the dealership too, right? On that service advisor, rather than having somebody sitting there in the waiting room annoyed and walking up to the counter every 30 minutes. Like, I just came in for an oil change. When's my car going to be done? Well, there were 14 oil changes in front of you. So I would present that's an added benefit too.
Yeah. And I mean, there's statistical data that's out there that proves that when the customer's not sitting in the showroom, if you have upsell opportunity in that repair order, that, don't hold me to this number, but the last one I read was 30% more. You can increase your repair orders by dollars. So if my customer's not sitting there looking at their watch and the service advisor sends them hey, you need to replace the tires and brakes versus an oil change, they're 30% more likely to say yes. And then that adds to that repair order dollar amount. So it's not only good for the convenience of the requester or the user at the dealership, it increases their bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. We see that too, right? When we look at the data, when you look at remote approvals, especially, and you have to do it right? You need pictures, you need videos, you need descriptions. You can't just text somebody and say, hey, you want $500 worth of tires. That doesn't usually work. But if you do it right and you can get a response quickly, and it makes a difference too if you can get it quickly, right? Because then if you're operating via text versus via a phone call where you leave a voicemail and then you play phone tag for 4 hours and then the customer's mad because they don't have their car back at 4:30 when they're supposed to, versus a text that they can approve quickly, it makes a big difference. It really does.
100%. And with the integration, it makes it even easier for that requester because they're already in the DMS application and it's their day-to-day, what they do. They press a button, it hits our API, ours hits Uber's, we order it, the customer doesn't even know what happened other than, cool, I'm getting a ride from this service department because I'm going to get some extra work done and I'm now getting a ride home.
All right. In that workflow, here's a question that just, I don't know why it just struck me. Who puts in the destination? Right. So like at what point in that workflow, so I drop my car off at the dealership on my way to work. I need to get to work. Right. Who puts One Reynolds Way, Kettering, Ohio in, the Uber app? Is that done by the service advisor? When does that happen?
So it's, oh, go ahead. You want to take it?
No, go ahead. You're good.
So it's actually integrated into the customer profile out of the Reynolds system. So we already know their home address. Obviously, we know where they are because they're at the dealership. So that the requesting location is by default the dealership. You can reverse them very quickly, right? You can just say, hey, I'm picking them up at their house, but you can edit. So they might say, I don't want to go home. Can you send me to the mall, right? It's going to be 3 hours before my vehicle's picked up. So they can quickly, easily edit the destination of where that ride goes to.
All right. So the advisor does that though.
Yeah, advisor, or it could even be the service appointment requester. It's whoever is facilitating that request to move that customer. It could be in the, at some point can be in the sales showroom where you sold the customer a car and you took their vehicle in trade and it's going to be a couple hours to get it prepped. So you're going to give them a ride somewhere.
Yeah, that's good. So, Anthony, something else I wrote down, you mentioned a minute ago, this idea of relocating drivers, right? And logistics and being in the right place. So I'm hoping one of you can shed a little more light on that for me, pull back the covers, pop the hood a little bit on how does that work? And again, this is just a lack of knowledge on my part on the Uber network and how Draiver fits in as well. But I think about, again, from my personal experience, right? I usually get an Uber at an airport. That's generally speaking about the most common time I get an Uber. But, maybe for a sporting event or any time that you're going to just need a ride, I suppose. But the times that I've used an Uber, for the most part, I've needed it in a pretty logical location, right? An airport. There's going to be a constant amount of people, constant flow of traffic that need a driver. So that the driver themselves would kind of know I should probably be around the airport, right? Or, a baseball game gets out, I should probably be around the ballpark. So how does this work with relocating drivers? In my head, it was always just the driver chose where they were going to be, and that's where they were, and they kind of used their experience to know where they want to be next. But maybe not. So how does that all fit together?
Well, I'll let Emily take the statistical data around Uber and their coverage because that kind of tails off the question that you just answered. And then I'll pick it back up and explain how we leverage Uber to create a massive amount of efficiencies of picking up and dropping off vehicles.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a huge volume of drivers on the Uber platform today. And that's enabling us to continue to deliver these great experiences for our riders. To be a bit more specific at scale, we're talking about 24 million Uber trips that happen every day. So the benefit for Reynolds and Draiver here is that this integration taps into that network of drivers.
Sure.
So, at a dealership, there's one other point or one other stat I can share is that Yipit Data recently came out with the stat that Uber has a 74% category position in rideshare in the US, which inherently makes Uber an extremely reliable option for auto dealers because, 74% of those rides that are happening are on Uber. So it's not to say like drivers do hang around the airports, but there are tons of drivers available throughout the US located around the dealerships that will be available for these rides.
Yeah, and that was the reason initially when Draiver was looking at the model of how do we create an efficiency, and it really all stems from, we all know that there's, in the transportation logistics world, there's this thing called a deadhead, right? Or a trip that ends and there's no way to get back. So let's think of I'll start with the most simplistic one: service pickup and drop off, no loaner car. I have to get the driver from the dealership or to the customer's home to pick up that vehicle. Typically, the standard model is send two drivers. So I'm going to use two humans and two vehicles, two amount of miles on the car and two amounts of gas, right? And then I'm going to pick up the car and bring it back. And then someone's going to follow that all the way back. Take the model that Draiver and Uber have now, which is I'm going to have the driver go to the customer's house and pick up their car in an Uber, get out of the Uber, and then drive the car back. The Uber goes to wherever their next destination is. So I've only created one leg of a trip where I needed two people instead of all four legs, in this case, back and forth, where I would need somebody to drive the car, because we're using that Uber to get the driver either to or from. Let's say I'm dropping it off. I'm going to drop it off. And then the Uber is going to rendezvous at the customer's house, pick up the driver and bring them back to the dealership to maybe do it again. Here's the more complex one. I've got 4 or 5 pickup or drop offs in a certain area. Let's just take 2 of them. I'm dropping one off and your next door neighbor needs something picked up, Greg, let's say. So instead of coming all the way back to the dealership, I'm going to bring you your car and drop it off. I'm going to use Uber to go down the street to your neighbor, pick up their car and come back to the dealership. So I've created this short leg of what would be a backhaul in that case, instead of the entire distance, which could be, who knows, 20 miles, 30 miles to go all the way back and then come back with a chase car to your neighbor. So and I can go on, but we're able to use the Uber platform to connect these drivers together to eliminate backhauls or chase drivers by up to 30% in most cases.
That's interesting. So, no, a lot of interesting scenarios. I am still a little bit, I wanted to double click on that idea of, relocating drivers. Is there any play there for the actual drivers, or is the driver kind of independently kind of moving where they need to be? Clearly, as you're talking, Emily, certainly, understanding Uber's a huge network, and it may not even be a necessity. It stuck out to me as something that was interesting. So if we just need to move on, that's fine. But I was just curious if there's an opportunity to go down that rabbit hole of logistics for drivers and making recommendations to the driver of, hey, there's going to be, as an example, and maybe I'm thinking too far into the future, but if I have a dealership and I have 17 appointments between 7 a.m. and 9:30 a.m., right, that are coming in, and they all are either going to drop off or they've requested a loaner. I don't have the loaners, so I can use Uber, obviously, to facilitate this. Is there a way to let local drivers know, hey, there's going to be an influx of rides that are needed from this address in this 2-hour window? We would advise you to probably be somewhere near so that you could pick these up and take these rides. Is any of that does it exist today, or is it in the works?
So Uber's functionality is supply and demand. So when there is supply, when there's demand for Uber, we will supply it. So when we see that, on the Uber app, this dealership is starting to order a lot of rides, drivers will know that they should be around that dealership around this time because there's going to be available rides for them. So not necessarily that we would plan that ahead of time. It's more of a real-time motion of a balance between supply and demand with our supply of drivers and the riders that are ordering those rides, which in this case is the dealership on behalf of their customers.
Okay, that makes sense.
I wouldn't say conversely, but because Draiver doesn't need a volume of drivers equal to what an Uber would have in a marketplace, because our demand for moving vehicles is significantly less than Uber's demand for moving people. But what Draiver does is we know that there's going to be those, let's say, 7 pickup and drop offs. So what we'll do is try to string as many of those together by connecting them. So when we put our trip out, it's 4 vehicle movements and 1 driver can pick up a complete itinerary, so that one Draiver driver would have 3, 4, 5, or 6 hours of work already connected in that one itinerary that they picked up. And they may have the same Uber that picks them up, drops them off, and follows them because they're in the market. And sometimes they even know each other. But they may have multiple Uber rides that provide that chase for them too. So it's a perfect combination that works in sync, and it works almost flawlessly every time.
Good. Are there any, as we're talking through this, I'm thinking, who is this best for, right? Are there any primary, I guess, if I'm a dealer, right, in what is a scenario where this is most appropriate for me? I mean, I think to a metro dealer, it's pretty logical, right? A high concentration of people, in theory, a high concentration of Uber drivers. A mid-size or even a small-size metro probably still makes sense. As you get more and more rural, I would imagine there are fewer and fewer drivers, right? There's fewer and fewer supply when it comes to Uber drivers. So maybe a better way to ask this question is, if I'm a dealership, is there a way for me to tell how many Uber drivers are in my area, or just so that I have some assurance? If I'm going to market this to my customers, I want to know that I can actually execute on it, right? So is there a way for me to know as a dealership, on average because the times they're going to need these realistically are between 7 and 9 in the morning and 4 and 6 at night, right? I mean, that's when this is going to really come to a head in most cases. Mm-hmm. So is there a way for me to see, on average, in my area, there are 112 Uber drivers available during those windows? I have no idea if that's possible. So if I'm dreaming stuff up, then tell me to shut up. But I'm just kind of curious.
Because that will change all the time. We can't deliver that solid data to say this is what it's always going to be in your area. We cannot control the drivers that are on the platform. But sure, as a dealer, you can get a really good idea by just going into your app. How far is the Uber away at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday? That's a really quick and easy way to get a sense for this yourself. Because it taps that same driver network. There's no difference.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking, is there one driver, or are there 20 drivers, right? If I have 10 or 15 people that are going to need a ride, what does my bandwidth actually look like? That's the one thing where I think through this. And while I'm not advocating for a loaner fleet or shuttles at all, I think that many dealerships have already moved away from those for more convenient options like we're talking about. But the one thing that could be seen as a positive there is you do have visibility to it, right? You do know what your supply is. You do know what is available. And maybe the answer is, this is something that you kind of have to test out, right, and see. And maybe that's the answer. I was just curious if there was an opportunity, a way for them to proactively know this is a good idea for me, right? I know that I'm going to be able to deliver these rides.
Yeah, I think, like I said, one of the easiest way to do that is to look at your phone. And maybe I should have been a bit more specific. If the driver's, 5-7 minutes away, I think there's going to, and you can see more drivers on there. You can see the Ubers that are in the area. But if there's one 25 minutes away, that might be a good indicator that there's not a lot of availability at that time in your area.
Yeah, and I think anecdotally, if you're in those markets, you'll know, right? You've gone out to eat, you've tried, you know, if there's Ubers available. And our model's just a little bit different because, until we have dealers in those markets or clients, rental car companies, fleet companies, any business that needs to move vehicles, we won't have any drivers. So there's cases where we go into markets now, especially in these new emerging markets that we're going into, Latin America and now in Canada. We're having to expand our driver marketplace specifically in an area because we have clients. So we play this chicken because there's no reason for us to recruit drivers if I don't have a business that's ordering rides, right? Conversely, if we have a business that's ordering rides in rideshare, we need to make sure that we have drivers in rideshare available or they'll get frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's where, this partnership too with Uber in the mix, Emily, having you and your organization there can make a big impact too. If I'm reading through the pieces correctly, Anthony, it's having that backbone of Uber available as well it makes a huge difference.
100%. It's it just adds such a robust addition to simply, I shouldn't say simply, the task of moving vehicles. If you can include that chase option in rideshare to your consumers and all of these things that dealers really, really struggle with from a coordination and organizational perspective, when we boil it down to an easy, simple to use product that we've all done together, right? The cool thing is that we're all really amazing tech companies. We're all really consumer facing and want to delight our customers, whether it's the dealer or the consumer at the end of the day. We're focused on that. So we're aligned in trying to make it easy for the end user, which is a dealer, and make it simple and hassle-free for the consumer. And when you accomplish that, then it helps the dealers grow, which then helps our products become, sticky to them in the marketplace.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. What I feel like I shouldn't even ask this because I think I've been leading a little bit into the future, and Emily's like, why are you asking that? We don't do that. But I am curious from your perspective, each of you, if there's anything on the horizon that you're working on or kind of what's next. That stuff always fascinates me, certainly, and kind of where we're heading. I think what we have today is pretty awesome. We're starting to see, a lot of demand and an uptick, and I can only see it continuing to grow. But curious, what's out there on the horizon? Anything else from your perspectives?
Well, we're launching the fully integrated product, as we know, coming up next week for rideshare. Then we're going to launch the next phase of that, which is the full valet product, moving vehicles and people with Uber's partnership and the integration. And then coming up for us, we have some V2 of our AI, the planning of everything, right? How many chase vehicles do I need to supply through Uber or physically and move with using AI as part of the dispatching logic? But also, something that I think is coming soon, probably 2024 in the roadmap, is the GoMoto kiosk that Reynolds has. Whereas, looking through the integration, one of the early designs is to have the ability to select rideshare directly from the kiosk when you bring your car after hours and drop it off, to be able to order Uber rideshare directly from the kiosk through that integration. So there's a lot of cool things we can do with this three-way partnership. And you guys are coming up with a lot of new products. I know you're buying new companies and you're expanding your reach. So there's just layers upon layers that we can continue to build upon what we already have today. And Emily, maybe you have some cool stuff that Uber's launching that we're not even aware of that you can share.
Yeah. So, well, for our integration, this is our guest rides product. So that really, helps the dealership replace that shuttle when they're getting a consumer back home or home back to the shop. But if, at some point in the future, Reynolds, Uber, and Draiver could explore the vouchers solution at Uber, which really does aim to help replace the loaner car. So what a voucher is, it says, hey, you'd have to have your Uber app, but we're going to give you $100 or $150 for the next 3 days because we know your car is going to be in the shop 3 days. You can use that at will. So I've got $150 in my Uber account and it's replacing the loaner car. I take it to work. I take it back home. I take it to the gym. Then I do the same thing the next day. And that replaces my dependency on a loaner vehicle for the 3 days that my car's in the shop. So I think that could be a great next step for Reynolds to adopt with our integration.
Emily, you got to start running or riding to the gym. You don't need a car to get to the gym. Get that cardio in.
What if I live in one of those rural areas where my gym is 10 miles away?
Hey, that's 10 miler. That's no big deal.
Yeah. You're getting your steps in, right?
That's Anthony on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. getting that 10 miler in. So
that's funny.
No, good stuff. I appreciate it. Well, what haven't we talked about, guys, that we should? Anything that we haven't touched on that you want to dive into before we hop off? Obviously, I want to be respectful of both of your time.
I think we talked about, and this is just chatting here, we talked about the chase. One thing that we both talked about touching upon is how we do use rideshare for roadside assistance. And on our side, on the Draiver side, we recover drivers. Let's say they're picking up the customer's car and the thing breaks down, right? So we'll dispatch an Uber immediately to rescue the driver, get them back, and then we'll deal with how do we get that car, whether it's on a wrecker or tow truck or whatever it is. But then Emily also, she has some good anecdotes around roadside assistance as well.
Yeah, I think this could definitely be in addition to those courtesy rides for planned services. Dealers can offer that roadside assistance by dispatching an Uber ride, in that scenario where they've had a car breakdown. We've also seen some dealerships, just different use cases, leverage Uber for parts delivery. So parts delivery can serve as another operational efficiency. Employees don't need to move those parts themselves, which frees up more time for them to spend servicing cars and customers. But to your point of what I would love some of your listeners to take away here, at least on the Uber side, is that Uber is making a big effort to meet dealerships on the platforms that they're using today. We don't want you to have to log into a separate system, learn a new thing. We want to be integrated into your existing workflows to make it very easy for your service managers to adopt. So that's what we're trying to do, especially with this Reynolds and Draiver integration here. We understand the importance of utilizing existing systems and building upon those, and we would like to be a part of that.
No, I love it. We talk all the time about building out a retail management system, right? And that's something that we've been focused on for well over a decade at Reynolds is how do we create an ecosystem that a dealer can run their business on, right? And manage a retail environment on. And this is rapidly becoming, if it isn't already, a part of it. And so this is really powerful when you think about that as part of, Reynolds retail management system. We're very excited about it.
Absolutely. And it is because, when we really look at everything that a dealership does from end to end, what we're supplying and what all of our partnerships are supplying is gaps in which they've been doing either manually or not at all, right? Or if they've been doing it manually, it's a really, really heavy lift and it's a really drag on their staff because they're utilizing quality staff like service advisors and sales associates and even service managers to go and do these tasks of giving people rides or giving or picking up a vehicle and bringing it in for sales or service with logistics. Because even if you use your own personnel at the end of the day to do some of that stuff. If you don't layer it with logistics, it still becomes wasteful, right? And from Reynolds' perspective, think about all the things you do, just inventory management and service and sales and parts, and just keep layering it on. All of it requires moving stuff around. And here we are today with this partnership that really streamlines that into one interface.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, Anthony Montiero, Emily Iberle, thank you both very much for your time today. It was a ton of fun talking and catching up, and hopefully we get to chat again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg, as always. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you. Well, that was a fun conversation with Emily Iberle, partner manager at Uber, and Anthony Montiero, executive vice president of integrated partnerships at Draiver. Really great partnership we have going on with them. Very excited about it, and I enjoyed that conversation. I learned a few things, and like Anthony said after we kind of stopped recording, maybe give a few product ideas to Uber. So we'll see. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to every episode of Connected on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcasts, and make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.